Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank the Backbench Committee for proposing this important debate today, and I thank all of my fellow APPG British Muslim members for their work. But I also really want to thank somebody from the other place, Baroness Sayeeda Varsi, our Treasurer of the APPG, for her constant work and holding a mirror up to us all, but particularly her own party, and the courage and strength that she shows in doing that. It's a privilege to listen and take part in this emotive, powerful and timely debate. Islamophobia is a scourge on society. It is on all of us to tackle it, call it out and to educate. It is something close to my heart, and I declare my interest as the co-chair of the APPG on British Muslims. I firmly believe it shouldn't be left to British Muslims to tackle Islamophobia in this country. It is on all of us to build a fair, inclusive society, something that we can all benefit from. And it is on all of us to highlight the huge contributions that Muslims make to our country. Contributions that I see in my constituency of Luton North every single day through inspirational charity work or public services and business. And if anyone wants to see great representation of how diversity is strength, I encourage people to look at the videos of Luton Town Football Club fans leaving Kenilworth Road in my honourable friend's constituency on news of our promotion to the Premiership League after their historic win taking them to Wembley, when they entered Bury Park to the sound of dole drums, Irish bands and peoples of all faith and none, all backgrounds and ages, celebrating together as one. Multiculturalism is alive and kicking in towns like Luton. It is a strength to be the town of many voices that we are. I have been fortunate to meet fantastic people from across the country living their faith through action, and I learn something new with every meeting. When I visited the British Heritage Muslim Centre, located in my honourable friend, the member for Manchester Gorton's constituency, I learnt that an invention by Muslims is the thing that gets me going and powered throughout the day: coffee. Possibly the greatest invention, especially for any parent or shift worker. And I'd like to talk and spend more time talking about the great work happening in Luton North by our Muslim community, whether it's through organisations like Inspire Eid, Discover Islam, Curry Kitchen, Faiths United, or internationally through Islamic Relief and the Muslim Council of Britain. But it's unfortunate that hate crime is so rife that now there is less time afforded to the wonderful contributions of Muslim communities in our country, and instead we have to spend so much time talking about the horrific impacts of Islamophobia, as well as other forms of discrimination that also exist. But it comes to no surprise to anyone that racists do not stay in their lanes. Hatred rears its ugly head in the form of misogyny, homophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-black hatred, as well as anti-disabled discrimination. In many instances, a perpetrator will not just limit their hatred to one protected characteristic, and often the victim will be picked out for more than one issue, facing a barrage of hatred from multiple parts of who they are. This is especially true for Muslim women, black Muslims and disabled Muslims, and we have heard the horrific examples from my dear friend, for the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse, just for doing her job. We know that according to statistics from the Home Office, hate crimes targeting Muslims rose by 25% last year, making Muslims the most targeted religious group. Almost half of religious hate crimes are directed towards Muslims. And with the atrocities taking place in the Middle East, we are seeing an even more horrific rise in Islamophobia. Tell Mama report an over 300% increase in recent incidents of Islamophobia in the UK. That is concerning enough on its own. But, Minister, knowing that this is only the tip of the iceberg, as the level of underreporting and misreporting is likely to be considerable, it is why we so desperately need the government to adopt the cross-party definition of Islamophobia. This would just be a start in tackling the problem head-on. Because how? How can the government begin to tackle Islamophobia if they refuse to actually define what it is? For years now, we hear the government will be looking into this. My honourable friend from Manchester Gorton has pushed hard on this, as have others, yet we are here still nothing, silent since, just more holding answers, more delays as incidents of Islamophobia continue to rise. This simply isn't good enough. So could the Minister give assurances that an agreed definition of Islamophobia will be coming forward from the government and the real reason for these delays? On top of this, I would be grateful if the Minister could also confirm that the additional funding announced by the Chancellor in the autumn statement to quite rightly tackle the rise in anti-Semitism, as was raised by the Honourable Member from Gillingham and Rainham, will be matched or at least fought for from the Department of Levelling Up to be tackling Islamophobia at the same rate. Because while we wait, more people will be subjected to abuse, intimidation and violence without a standard that institutions and individuals are held to and accountable for. Over 15,746 attacks have been committed against Muslims since 2017. How many more must happen? How much more misery must be inflicted before this government acts? And as my honourable friend and ardent campaigner against Islamophobia, the member for Bradford West, has called for many times, when will the long-promised advisor on Islamophobia be announced and, importantly, worked with? Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to now turn to the intersectional aspects of Islamophobia, which is incredibly important, particularly for younger generations. We know the horrific impact and the rise of Islamophobic attacks following the former Prime Minister, the former member for Uxbridge, following his description of veiled women as, and I quote, letterboxes. Research from Tell Mama showed that Islamophobic incidents rose a shocking 375% the week after his comments, from someone who clearly, but sadly, didn't know better. I had constituents in Luton North contact me to share their anger and concern, which I also share, at the impact of the former Home Secretary, or should I refer to her as another contender for the next Tory leadership, slurs against Pakistani men. Not founded in evidence, but founded in fear-mongering and Islamophobia. It is beholden on all of us in this place and in positions of power to lead by example, to continue to learn, to continue to educate ourselves, and to challenge our own prejudices. For being anti-racist is something to consistently strive for, and many have a lot to learn still, especially when it comes to intersectionality and Islamophobia. Shaukat Patel, a board member of Muslim Engagement Development, reported lots of women say they are fearful of going out just because of the fact they have a headscarf. For those wearing a niqab, they find it even more difficult because they know, almost certainly, they are going to get verbal abuse. The visibility of Muslim women increases the chances of them being targeted for hatred. They experience the double whammy of misogyny and racism. This is often compounded when class is also factored in. This discrimination creates barriers to talented, compassionate and experienced Muslim women in many walks of life. In the workplace, accessing services, particularly important for Muslims with disabilities, representation in media and, sadly, in politics and other forms of public life. And we are all the worst off because we are missing out on the best and the widest pool of talent. And representation matters, not just in politics, but in every walk of life. And the constant use of culture wars to stoke division and hatred by those in power who should know better is a dead end. It is detrimental to all of us, especially those of us who want a fairer, safer and more inclusive society. So on the flip side, we can also see positive steps being taken internationally leading to progress. This year, the United Nations held the first ever International Day to Combat Islamophobia on the 15th of March 2023. This was after a resolution backed by 60 Muslim member states was passed by the UN General Assembly. The UN called on all UN member states to mark the day by recognising Islamophobia and to work to combat it. So I'd be grateful to hear from the Minister if this was indeed marked and recognised by the UK government, and if it's not, does it plan to next year? Mr Deputy Speaker, this is the point I would like to end on, that we can do better than this. And if we are to build a safe, fair and inclusive country for all, then we must. And that starts with the leadership of this country, especially the leadership of the Conservative government that has been found all too often wanting on the challenges of Islamophobia. Despite what some politicians and media outlets describe as woke issues, Islamophobia is an issue that affects entire communities, our villages, towns and cities across the country and internationally as well. It's a poison knows no boundaries. We know that the world is an incredibly unstable and volatile place, especially for people of faith. The example of state-sanctioned Islamophobia that we see in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs is an affront to humanity. The reports of torture, imprisonment, killings and denial of one's religion's breaches multiple human rights laws. And it is genuinely welcome that the House is united in the condemnation of these atrocities. But for many residents in Luton North who have contacted me, I share the condemnation also of senior members of the Netanyahu government when they speak about flattening Gaza or enacting Gaza's Nakba, compounded with other dehumanising language, with Israel's president claiming that there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. When it comes to genocide, we look back at history, we even stand in this chamber, and we utter the words, never again. Yet here we are, staring at it from afar, knowing that this tragedy is now the present for the Uyghurs and a real threat for the Palestinian people. If we are to avoid the further ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, I would urge the Minister to speak directly to their colleagues in the FCDO to ensure that the UK backs the United Nations' unprecedented calls to invoke Article 99 of the UN Charter for a ceasefire to protect civilian populations. We must ensure that we work as an international community, that we strain every sinew in the pursuit of peace, an urgent, lasting ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, bringing an end to the innocent loss of life, freeing of hostages, and to ensure that the current atrocities being endured are no one else's future.